wasn't so much a decision that I just sort of came to about, was I pondering if I should go or should not. The decision to go was almost made for me really early on. It was just one of the things that both parents had just constantly told me, you're going to college because you're not going to be doing this. And by this, it was sort of just living a life that depended a lot on just manual labor. So what made me decide? You know, I'd love to say I had an epiphany and that I had this, this big motivation one day that let me see the light. I sort of just knew that I was going to, and then I had to. And then things sort of just fell into place. But yeah, there wasn't a singular event that led to my decision to go to college. There was the existence of a profession, actually, that sort of was the motivator. And it was teachers, just teachers in general. Because, and it's directly linked to the economy. The economy where I'm originally from, it's Wolfe County. And we refer to counties over towns frequently. There wasn't so much an agriculture base, really hardly at all. There was minimal industry base. So, like when folks thought about potential jobs, the #1 industry in terms of employment in that area, and this is anecdotal, I'm going to assume is through the public school system. So we got to see, growing up, who are those folks that have more of a manual labor approach, and who are the ones that are in more professional roles, and it was always the folks in education. And actually, I did end up going, majoring in education, but it was sort of, we saw what they did and realized how they got there. So it was teachers in general, so no one really stood out, but it was more so just that whole group, and even probably the school system that sort of pushes you along to go to college. It's regretful now looking back, but a huge factor in telling me where I was going to go to college was money. For one, I didn't apply to many colleges at all. And it seems silly now, because now I would encourage a student, well, find a resource to help pay the application fee, but I didn't necessarily have the means or the knowledge to know how to get assistance with the application fees, so I really only applied to a handful. Fortunately, I had really good grades and had acceptance and scholarship offers. But what was the decision was, Berea looked like the better package in terms of how it was going to benefit me tuition-wise. Through serendipity, that was a very good deal, because once I got there, I realized, wow, I mean, I really fell into something good. But it really came down to comparing that scholarship versus another scholarship offer compared to another one, and seeing how it was going to impact me and my family financially. I wish I could say that I went back and looked at the U.S. News and World Report and saw that these colleges were ranked in different spots. It wasn't that. It was dollars and cents. It truly is an understatement to say that it was a wake-up call and that it was culture shock. And people often, because Berea is a super small town, the institution's really small, so people may misunderstand this notion of culture shock. I'll start with that one. The culture shock was in that these folks, meaning the students and the faculty, legitimately cared about learning and learning their subject matter, learning in general. And that may sound like obvious and common sense, but in high school it was as if a lot of our students were almost protected with good grades, because the teachers realized there wasn't a whole lot more going for these folks. So you want to make sure they have good GPAs, get them into colleges. So don't let the grade take precedent over what they actually leave the classroom in. So I sort of went into college thinking that's probably how it is. I mean, you sort of, you got these teachers sort of looking out for you, if you're not engaged fully in the subject matter, it won't offend anyone. Well, I found out, obviously, in the first semester that it's a little different. I mean, I didn't get to go into the first semester at Berea and all the teachers say, "Ah, that's Robert Hayes. He'll get an A," because he's always gotten A's. And I didn't, that was a shock to me also. I didn't appreciate what was in the syllabus. I didn't believe everything that was in the syllabus, oddly. So I had to learn. There were spikes in my learning. Kindergarten and first grade was a pretty dramatic spike. It sort of leveled off. And then college was another huge dramatic spike. So anyway, that was the first bit of the change. And then really just coming to terms with everything I was sort of prepared for about college. It was all get there. That was how I was prepared. Get to college, get to college, get to college. No one really told me, though, what to do once you get there. Luckily, I mean, I sort of made a connection here and there with folks on the campus and got through it. All through my academic career, I mean, A's were just an expectation. I mean, they just were. Then I get to college that first semester, and I'd sort of heard that really you just got to get by. You want to pass a class. No one really cares about your grades. So, and that was just from, well, it turns out that was from a lot of students who maybe didn't graduate from college. These were folks that, looked up to. They were older. I thought, well, they've been there, they know. So grades initially, that was an issue for me because I completely slacked off and disregarded my studies, and it showed after that first semester. Proud to say I finished up there on that same getting the A's track, but the grades, that was something I struggled with. It was embarrassing. Having only been accustomed to A's, seeing other shapes on the report card that didn't quite look like A's was embarrassing. Didn't really know who to tell that to, because I'm sure my parents would have, and I didn't actually share a lot of my performance with them there. Money even, because part of the criteria for getting into some schools like Berea is, like, you're not ruled out if you're a typical midway income family, but there's a lot of lower income families there, a lot of lower income students rather, and there just wasn't a lot of additional financial resources, or at least things to just do silly things with. Like, you didn't have money to just spend freely, but you would notice that some students, maybe it was much easier to access, or their parents had a little bit greater availability, or a greater, it was easier for them to then send in some things. So it just sort of perceiving, it's still the haves and have-nots, even though looking back, everyone was almost a have-not, but it didn't seem that way. Yeah, just simple little things, in retrospect, were molehills, but they seemed like Mount Everest, I think, at the time. I have varying levels of patience with students now, and that surprises me, actually, because initially I would like to say that I entered, like, as an academic advisor, I'd like to say that I'm just as patient with every single student. But I'll have to admit, there are some students who, if I think that they have sort of had they've had good advice given to them, they've really had everything laid out, and if they don't take that advice as readily, sometimes, I don't want to imply that I'm impatient with them, but it's oddly disappointing, even though I was that student. I mean, I had absolutely been told all these things. So in some ways, there's some disappointment, but I absolutely always temper that with, and this is sort of my mental process when I'm working with students. Our meetings can go 30 minutes to an hour plus. So after that sort of initial disappointment, I then remember back what I went through, and then ultimately I do get a newfound sense of patience for my students. And it isn't so much based on if they're first generation or not. It's just the fact that they're new and young and going to college. But yeah, because I think looking back, I had some professors who had minimal patience as far as what I was doing in the classroom that first couple semesters, sadly. And that left an impression on me, but I also had some who were super patient, and that left an impression. So I'm still, which I'm growing and learning, I still find that my initial reaction is often, I can't believe, and this is my internal dialogue, I can't believe these folks aren't taking advantage of all this stuff. Then I always come back to ours and saying, neither did you, and then we just change completely. So yeah, I actually sort of relive a lot of the things I've learned with each of my student interactions. In my professional life, I think about and I will absolutely share a very simple piece of advice. I think about what would I tell a student that's going to make them really see the light, but ultimately, what I think about even more is what's beyond just telling a student about something that's going to be super helpful. How can I make that student believe it? I don't know that yet. I wish I knew that. If I did, I would probably treat it in a very proprietary way and reap some benefits. But you know, people told me all the right stuff. They told me things like do good, you know, do your studies, go to class. None of that really sunk in. Even though I believe it, and I find myself still sharing that with students. The one thing, though, that I think that you can tell a student, and it doesn't come across quite in the sort of dressing down or talking down to in a way, is just say, make sure you make a connection with someone on the campus. Because if you make a positive connection with someone on the campus, all those other things are going to then be relayed to you, and the relationship that you now have with that person puts them in a different light. It means something completely different to me to hear the same thing sometimes from different folks just based on my relationship with them. If you trust someone and you've made that connection to the campus, suddenly it sounds like sage advice they're giving you, whereas often, like in orientations, we will always tell our students, get the good grades, you'll be on academic probation. We're strangers, first of all, and we're often there in a very formal setting, and this sort of puts a lot of students off. So the advice I would give is just make that connection. And my hope is that they would make a connection, especially here at UK, because we have a really strong advising staff across the campus, and know that that advisor or someone in that college is then going to enforce all those things that I would have preached to them. So get connected to your campus is the one bit of advice.